Tales from the Half Moon Inn presents The Werewolf of the Hudson Valley. Written and narrated by Tony Capobianco. The fire in the fireplace crackled as I leaned forward in my chair and shined my flashlight in my face and asked, "Have you ever gone outside at night and felt like you weren't alone? Have you ever thought that someone or something was watching you?" "Oh my gosh, Dan. Yes, there have been times at night when I couldn't shake the fear that something was watching me while I walked Pennyfluff, the dancing labradoodle," Christina replied as her eyes grew wide. "Yeah, you're not alone. I too have heard noises in the woods when I walk Jupiter, my German shepherd, at night. Who knows what's scurrying around in the darkness? Luckily, I don't think that any animals would want to mess with my furry best friend," Enoch added as he looked towards the window. "All right, Dan. It's your turn to tell us a scary tale," said Felicity with a mischievous smile. "The next story might make you think twice about the sounds that you hear when you venture into the darkness of the night," I said as I began to tell the next creepy story to the spooky squad. Once upon a Hudson Valley full moonlit night, a teenager walked his dog in the ghostly light. The tall trees cast a shadow as if the Roman gods of old had tossed a blanket over the moon. The silent dark of night contributed to the escalating fever of fright. Greatly diminished sight made the ominous sense of dread more difficult to fight. On most nights, such feelings of fear are nothing but a primordial instinct, but this wasn't most nights. Rob walked Scooter, his mutt, fairly close to his house, just as he had done every night over the 8 years that he had had his furry friend. Side by side they'd walk through the backyard and enter the woods. Having Scooter do his business in the forest meant that Rob wouldn't have to mess around with a pooper scooper. Each step that they took into the woods broke the eerie silence. As Scooter sniffed and circled around a small patch of forest floor for about 5 minutes in search for the perfect spot to fertilize, Rob began to think that they weren't alone. "Come on, Scooter, make potty. Go make potty, boy. Let's go," Rob said, hoping to speed up the process so that they could get back inside. Scooter had other plans as he continued to sniff around as if he was an inspector looking for a clue to solve a crime. Standing in place with a flashlight in his left hand and Scooter's leash in his right, he saw it. 2 large yellow eyes staring at him. It was about 50 yards away from them. From that distance, it was hard to judge how high off of the ground the eyes were. Rob didn't know what kind of animal those eyes belonged to, but the eyes were definitely too big to belong to a cat or a possum. He shined his light towards the direction of the eyes to get a better look. There were bears and coyotes that lived in the area. As he searched the area with his flashlight, he couldn't find the owner of the yellow eyes. The silence was broken by the distinctive sound of footsteps walking over the leaf-covered floor. Scooter suddenly stopped circling and snapped his head towards the footsteps. His canine senses searched for the cause of the noise as his hair rose between his shoulder blades. Scooter picked up on the presence of something that intruded upon his territory. He barked loudly. It was a deep bark that was fitting for a large dog of his size. Weighing 65 pounds, he was no lap dog. Scooter stopped barking and looked at his master. The short silence was shattered by a loud, haunting howl. Rob's blood ran cold. Goosebumps arose. His heart pounded in his chest, and it felt like a bolt of electricity had traveled up his spine. He had never heard anything like that before. He was familiar with the barking and howling of dogs and coyotes. The sound of howling wolves in nature documentaries didn't match what he had just heard. The deeply unsettling and beastly call continued. It sounded like it belonged to a very large beast. The terrible sound seemed to be a hybrid of a wolf's howl and a lion's roar. The howling rang through the woods. Even the trees seemed to tremble at the horror. The pale light from the full moon trickled through the canopy of trees, and this too added to the frightful scene. Scooter jumped back about 4 feet at the sound of this unknown creature. Rob shouted, "Let's go home, boy," as he ran out of the woods and towards his lawn. Scooter dutifully obeyed his master and ran ahead as far as the length of the leash allowed. The howling ceased and gave way to the sound of Rob's heavy breathing and the pounding of his feet against the ground. The dark shroud of the woods unraveled as Rob and Scooter reached the open sky of his backyard. The pale bluish light of the full moon returned Rob's sense of sight. This was both a blessing and a curse. Being able to see without a flashlight was a blessing which brought relief in being able to see what was out there. It was also a curse, because seeing an enormous beast would only raise the level of fear to an even higher level. The house was getting closer as Rob and Scooter sprinted to reach it. The problem was that the creature was getting closer, much closer. The beast growled as it ran its intended prey down. Dan heard the large footsteps running upon the leaves that littered the forest floor. The noise of the rustling branches made by the beast as it moved through the woods gave Rob a blending of reassurance and fear. He was reassured because as long as he could hear the sounds in the woods, it meant that the animal hadn't yet reached his lawn. That reassurance died swiftly as the sound of an animal crashing through tree limbs and the forest brush stopped. The growling continued and in fact had grown closer. Rob turned his head as he continued to run in order to take a glance and see if they were still being chased, and if so, by what. He saw an enormous creature. It was taller than him, and he was 5'10". It was also much bigger than him, and must have weighed over 300 pounds. Only a bear could be that size, but bears don't howl. The house was now approximately 15 yards away. There's no way of knowing what raced faster, Rob's heart, legs, or his mind. This wasn't just the race of his life, but a race for his life. "Daddy, help! Help me!" screamed Rob as he sprinted as fast as his legs could possibly carry him. As in a nightmare, it felt as though the ground was swallowing his feet in quicksand, no matter how fast and hard he ran. A sharp, piercing pain tore down his back as an immensely powerful blow blasted him 10 feet into the air and crashing onto the ground. As Rob had been launched into the air, the force of the assault flung his flashlight from his left hand, and it flew a number of yards until it crashed through the kitchen window. Dazed and confused, Rob was like a slaughtered hunk of meat laid out on the ground with his eyes shut. The wind had been knocked out of him. Although time seemed to feel like an eternal now, only several moments had passed since he had been sliced and thrashed into the moonlit sky. Rob opened his eyes. The haunting, pale glow of the full moon revealed to him what the dark forest had previously concealed. What he saw shouldn't have been possible, but the ethereal light of the moon divulged the unmistakable presence of a monster. Yes, that creature was a monster. Of that fact, there was no doubt. That thing was not a coyote. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a wolf. It certainly wasn't a bear. A furry beast that stood at least 6 feet tall and weighed no less than 300 pounds stood on the lawn of a house in the Hudson Valley. It had the head of a wolf, but the head was far too big to belong to any ordinary wolf or dog. The teeth appeared as though they would be interchangeable with the big serrated teeth in the jaws of a great white shark. Its muscular body was a horrendous combination of man and wolf. It stood upright on its back legs. It was capable of being bipedal or walking on all fours. Its arms resembled the arms of a gorilla. Its razor-sharp claws resembled that of a tiger or a Deinonychus. The latter was a frightful dinosaur that you probably know better as the velociraptors of the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies. The piercing yellow eyes of this monster completed its hauntingly otherworldly appearance. The creature that stood in Rob's backyard seemed to be a mythical monster, but this was not a myth. The beast appeared to belong in a nightmare, but apparently it had escaped into the real world. This hulking horror was a werewolf. The werewolf momentarily paused because it had become distracted by the loud noise made when the flashlight broke through the glass window. That momentary distraction gave Rob just enough time to see the monster that had attacked him, and to pick up a piece of broken glass to use as a weapon. The werewolf had walked a few steps towards the window, in the manner that a man walks. Then, once it returned its focus towards its prey, it lunged towards Rob as a beast on all fours. As the werewolf pounced on top of Rob repeatedly stabbed it in its chest and neck with the sharp shard of glass. At the same time, Scooter recklessly threw himself on the back of the werewolf. The large jaws of Scooter bit into the monster again and again. The werewolf and Scooter continuously growled at each other. The long arm of the werewolf was finally able to reach towards its back and swipe Scooter off as if he was a pesky fly. Blood sprayed all over the green grass. The razor-sharp claws of the werewolf had torn into Scooter's flesh and deeply wounded him. "Son, get away from that thing! Quick! Get in the house! Now!" yelled Rob's dad. Rob's dad had heard the kitchen window break, and when he saw a large animal attacking his son, he grabbed his Glock. As soon as Rob got away from the beast, his dad began to unload his clip into it. Boom, boom, boom! Boom, boom! Having suffered injuries from being bit, stabbed, and shot, the werewolf fled into the woods. Rob's mom took him to the emergency room to get rabies shots and to get stitches. His dad took Scooter to a 24-hour animal hospital because he was in dire shape. After surgery, Scooter pulled through. If it wasn't for Scooter's loyalty, a flashlight breaking a window, and his dad's quick response, Rob would have been mauled to death by the vicious werewolf. The traumatic events of that evening deeply scarred Rob, emotionally, physically, and psychologically. The wound on his back caused by the razor-sharp claws of the monster left him a sinister reminder that nightmares aren't always the stuff of dreamland. Sometimes nightmares are real. The attack led Rob to use his internet browser to research werewolf lore and to investigate whether other animal attacks had been reported. The search results for the keywords animal attack and Hudson Valley produced an astounding wealth of reports. Many of the reports included ordinary dog and coyote attacks. Fewer reports detailed the rare black bear attacks which resulted in the death of a person or child. The finding that stood out the most was the number of articles which reported that the number of animal attacks in the Hudson Valley had soared in recent years. The local news reported that animal attacks and deaths caused by animal attacks had quadrupled in the past 5 years. Were werewolves responsible for the recent surge in violent animal attacks? Or is it just one werewolf? More research would need to be done in order to discover the answers. What seemed certain was that the werewolf of the Hudson Valley lived on after the night of the attack. Rob's father had searched the woods the next morning along with people from animal control, and they didn't find its body. Although Rob's father believed that it was some kind of bear that assaulted and injured his son, Rob knew better. Rob knew that it was a werewolf that nearly murdered him and Scooter on that horrific night. Next time you walk your dog or hear a noise outside at night, remember that you might not be alone. The rustling that you hear, the fear and the feeling that you are being watched might not be caused by your imagination. There are times when, in an instant, the ordinary changes into the extraordinary. The natural can transform into the supernatural. Sometimes the monsters of our nightmares enter our lives. When nightmares become reality, run! I hope you enjoyed your stay at the Half Moon Inn. Do come and visit us again. Until next time, always remember that just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there. The following is based on a true story. It's a story that my Opa means grandpa in German, believed to be true. It's about his father, my great-grandfather Carl. Christina Zorn, member of the Spooky Squad, will share this encounter of alleged witchcraft in pre-World War II Germany. Did this scary story really happen as described? Or is it an example of old-world superstition? You decide. Tales from the Haunted Half Moon Inn presents A Witch in Germany. Leaning forward and looking out the window as thunder boomed, Christina began to tell her story. Have you ever had a premonition? Did that premonition come to pass? Have you ever felt like you or someone that you knew was cursed? If so, then do I have a story for you. The person who told this story to me believed it to be true. The following supernatural events were passed down by the family of Carl. The time was pre-World War II in the early 20th century. The place? Legerdorf, a small town in Germany. It was an old, cute, and rustic countryside made up of quaint little farms. This place looked like it came out of a storybook. The Industrial Revolution may as well have been a fantasy from a wild science fiction novel as far as the lives of the people of Legerdorf were concerned. The bleak, mechanical destruction and smoggy pollution of nature produced by large cities hadn't touched this pristine countryside. Not all was as idyllic as the outward appearance seemed. Hidden amongst the townsfolk were unseen forces and powers. This was a place where witches, ghosts, and curses dwelt. The modern world may have largely dismissed such things as antiquated superstition, but the good people of Legerdorf continue to live and believe as they had always lived and believed, or at least as they had for as long as anyone could remember. Carl was a man in his 30s. He was average size, 5'8". He had brown hair and a prominent nose. Hard physical labor had made him stronger than his average build might have otherwise suggested. He had spent time laboring in a cement factory, laying railroad ties with his son Max, and he eventually became a fisherman. fishing journeys took him from the Atlantic Ocean to the Black Sea. Some family members said that Carl had spiritual gifts. One of these apparent gifts was the gift of premonition. These spiritual gifts saved his life, and they also helped him when he faced a witch that was terrorizing his town. One day, Carl had a very strong feeling that resonated deep inside of him until it crashed into his consciousness as an ocean wave crests and then crashes onto the shoreline. This powerful feeling was accompanied by the brief thought, "Don't go out on that ship." It seemed to him to be more than a thought, because it stood apart from the ordinary thoughts that he had had on every ordinary day. This felt different. It seemed like a gut feeling, but yet, at the same time, it felt as though it was much more than a gut feeling. Ignoring strong bodily signals and unexplainable mental messages of forewarning was something that any fisherman worth his salt knew to be a mistake that could prove to be his last. It was understood that ignoring dire warnings could result in dire consequences. Fortunately for Carl, he trusted his instincts and the distinct voice in his head. He did not board the fishing boat on that day. As a result, he lived to see many more days. Unfortunately, his fishing mates did not fare as well. They did board the fishing vessel and sailed out to sea. They never returned to port. This is a picture of the vessel that was lost at sea. No one ever heard from them or the ship again. Tragically, the crew perished. These spiritual sensitivities enabled Carl to help his town with supernatural problems. Farmers and the people of Lagerdorf were highly dependent on the land and the farm animals. If the crops didn't produce, or if the livestock became sick and died prematurely, then the people would suffer. This was a time before giant grocery store chains sprawled across every part of the country. Germany, in particular, suffered greatly after World War I. Life was hard for the average German. It was no surprise that the people of Lagerdorf became very concerned when livestock began to act very strangely. Farmers noticed that their pigs suddenly stopped eating. The pigs would appear to be very hungry as they approached the feeding trough to feed, but they would jerk away from the trough. It was observed that the pigs desperately wanted to get to the food trough, but they squealed in pain, as though an unseen force or an invisible wall prevented them from reaching it. If this unexplainable behavior continued, the pigs would die. Neither the farmers nor the people of the town could afford the loss of such a large number of livestock. Another strange occurrence began at the same time that the pigs began to starve themselves. A little 10-year-old girl had begun to scream every night as she laid in her bed. After the first night, the girl told her parents that she had been violently attacked after she went to bed. When the little girl's parents asked her who had assailed her, she replied that it was a witch, an old hag. She explained that this hideous hag came through the window and then repeatedly hit her. Visible bruises and cuts confirmed that something bad was indeed going on. On the second evening, the girl's father stood guard sitting in a rocking chair in the corner of her room. After midnight, the window opened seemingly of its own accord, and the father heard the terrible cries and screams of his only daughter. He watched as his baby girl flailed her arms as though she was trying to fight an attacker off. The truly shocking thing was that he didn't see any intruder. As far as he could see, the only two people in the room were he and his daughter. He briefly wondered if his precious daughter might have been having a nightmare. The thing was that a nightmare wouldn't explain how the bedroom window opened itself up. Nightmares don't bleed out into the real world, or did they? Then he saw his daughter's nightgown rip as fresh scratches appeared on her stomach. "Papa, help me. The witch is hurting me. Please make her stop. It hurts. It really hurts," cried the helpless little girl. Not being able to see the intruder, he did the only thing that he could think to do. He put himself on top of his daughter in an attempt to shield her from the invisible intruder. White heat scorched his back as it felt like long, sharp nails raked down his neck and back. This continued for several minutes, and then it ceased. "Is she still here?" he asked as he breathed heavily. "No, Papa, she's gone. She climbed out the window again," said the little girl in a meek, shaky voice. He cradled his sweet girl in his arms and rocked her back and forth as he said, "It's okay. It's okay. You're okay now. Papa's here." Knowing the telltale signs of witchcraft, he had no doubt that this was the sinister work of a wicked witch. News about the starving pigs had launched rumors of a curse throughout the town. Curses were as real as lightning to the folk of Lagerdorf. This was a people that learned all about witches, curses, and witchcraft from previous generations. There wasn't any question about what he would do next. It was clear to him. It was time to talk to Carl. Carl had been known to have been a witch hunter. After having been told about the frightful supernatural events afflicting the innocent little girl, Carl assured the family that he would help them. He vowed to defeat the witch and protect the girl. "Who has a quarrel with you?" asked Carl. "Nobody. I can't think of anyone that I have wronged," answered the girl's father. "Maybe so, but often it is sufficient for a person to merely perceive that you have wronged them in these kinds of cases," Carl responded. "So this is because of something that I don't even know that I did?" questioned the girl's father in a frustrated tone. "Don't know yet, but that is a possibility. There is no doubt that this is the malignant work of a witch. Witches are vain, jealous, insatiable, and consumed by anger. Has a woman made a romantic advance towards you?" questioned Carl as he squinted his eyes. "Oh, well, now that you mention it, Frau Olga did ask me if I'd show her a good time, and I playfully said, 'Yeah, if I met you when you were young,' but I thought we were joking. I'm married, and she is older than me." Yes, that is a likely possibility. If she is a witch, she would undoubtedly take great offense to such a comment. But worse than that, a witch would view your response as an invitation. Worst of all, a witch who is powerful enough in the dark arts might even see your playful quip as the design to make her desires come true, Carl explained in a somber but curious tone. "I'm sorry. I don't think that I'm following what you're saying. How could my little joke that was said in passing serve as a plan for her? A powerful and knowledgeable witch can steal the vitality from children. Such a witch could siphon the life force off of a virgin. The innocence of a child is something that is highly coveted by witches. They yearn to restore their youth. They crave sensual pleasures. I'm afraid that this wicked witch may want to drain your daughter's vitality and transfuse it to quicken her," explained Carl. "No, that must never happen." "Fret not, my friend. I will stop her. I started fasting 2 days ago when I first heard about the curse that was placed on the farmer's pigs. I also saw another sign. I noted that milk was turning sour prematurely. Indeed, that was another sign that witchcraft was afoot. If my defense against witchcraft manual is correct, then the witch may be performing an unholy novena. As you know, Christians will often pray in novena, that is, pray for a particular intention for 9 straight days. In a form of diabolical mockery, a witch too will work magic for 9 straight days to achieve a great favor. Transferring the youth of a child to an old witch is precisely one such big favor. I will continue my novena, and on the 9th night I will come to your house and put an end to this terror," confidently declared Carl. So it came to pass that on the 9th night since this waking nightmare had begun, Carl went to the innocent girl's house to do battle with a bride of the Prince of Darkness. He went into the girl's room, and he poured blessed salt around her bed in a circle. While the girl's father vigilantly sat in the rocking chair, Carl kneeled on the floor in prayer. Then, just like the previous 8 nights, the window appeared to open itself shortly after the witching hour, and the little girl began to scream. Carl rose to his feet. He had the 5 books of Moses in his left hand and a whip in his right. He read the book backwards and flailed his whip towards the girl. It appeared as though Carl had been whipping the girl, but no marks appeared on her. A terrible scream filled the air. This scream was different than the screams of the previous 8 nights. The scream was different because it did not come from the girl. No, on this, the 9th night, the scream came from the invisible witch. The unseen foe shrieked in terror. It was the kind of shriek that makes a person's blood run cold. Then suddenly there was silence. The witch was gone, and the girl was safe. On that night, the hunter had become the hunted. The very next day, Carl and the girl's father paid Frau Olga a visit, and they noted that she had welts and gashes on her face and on the back of her arms and neck. This confirmed that she was the witch that had been assaulting and terrorizing the innocent little girl. They gave her an ultimatum. Get out of Lagerdorf and never come back, or we'll become the instruments of the wrath of Almighty God. Frau Olga left town and was never seen there again. After she left, the pigs began to eat again, and the milk stopped going sour prematurely. Life returned to its beautiful normalcy once again. Do you like ghost stories? Better yet, do you like true ghost stories? If the answer is yes, then join me as I tell another scary story from the haunted Half Moon Inn. Together, we will travel to the frightening land of the supernatural. We're going to a place where it appears as though cracks in the fabric of reality allow otherworldly beings into our world. This episode is about the real experiences that my friends and I shared when we worked at a movie theater back in the late 90s. We believed that the theater was haunted. Some of the names and places will be changed to protect the privacy of those involved. The events will be recalled as accurately as possible. These are our stories. The Haunted Movie Theater, a true ghost story. As the 20th century was drawing to a close, strange paranormal events showed no signs that they would cease on account of the rapid advances of science and technology. Ghost stories appear to have been with us since the dawn of man. Perhaps tales of ghostly apparitions and spooky spirits will remain with us for as long as we walk this amazing space rock that we call Earth. Do you think that spirits only haunt ancient castles and old homes? Do you feel safe from ghostly hauntings when you're in busy public establishments such as libraries, restaurants, and movie theaters? If so, then this particular true story may make you reconsider. Around 1997, I worked at a Cineplex in the Galleria Mall. Along with my friends and many of my co-workers, I believed that the movie theater was haunted. In the late 90s, it was common for the supervisors in the theater to work multiple roles, including supervising the concession stand, the box office, operating the projection booth, and the floor crew, which cleaned theaters. Jared Batsy Batsvelka, a supervisor, was working as the projectionist one day. His friends called him Batsy on account of his last name, not because he was batty in any way. Working in the projection booth was a very different experience than working the other jobs at the theater. whereas all of the other positions required working in the very hectic conditions created by the sea of customers that swept through the theater in tsunami-like waves. Working in the projection booth was like working in an island of calm. However, all was not always as it seemed. Alone in the projection booth with the door locked, Jared felt as though someone was about to walk by him. Instinctively, even knowing that there was no one up in the booth with him, he looked to see who was about to pass by him. Just a few feet away from him, he saw the faint image of a man. The man appeared as though he was half in this material world and half in another world. It was something like the image of a grainy, low-definition video that is lacking all of the pixels to create the clear, full image. This low-pixel man appeared to be dressed as a construction worker. After only a few seconds, the ethereal figure vanished. It was as though the pixels on the fabric of our visible reality had simply been deleted. Batsy had similar experiences on a number of occasions. He'd seen the ghostly figure of the construction worker in the projection booth, as well as near the popcorn popping room, which was just outside of the booth. Batsy never felt an evil or negative vibe from this ghost. For this reason, he never feared him. In fact, he would occasionally say, "Hello," and ask this ghostly man how he was doing, but he never received a reply. Carlos, another supervisor, also told the story of his ghostly encounters in the theater. On one occasion, Carlos was working as the projectionist. Alone in the booth, a man yelled and complained to him about the sound being too loud in Theater 5. After complaining, the man, dressed like a construction worker, walked out and disappeared. Carlos saw that the door had been locked, and when he ran down the hallway and then down the stairs, he only found a second locked door. He had been alone, yet he had just interacted with someone that shouldn't or couldn't have been there. On several other occasions while performing theater and aisle checks, Carlos had seen the same man sitting by himself in Theater Room 5, or sometimes in Theater 6. Theaters 5 and 6 were the last theaters on the first floor, near the emergency exits. On those occasions, the man dressed as a construction worker would suddenly disappear. While the apparitions of the ghost weren't witnessed by all of the theater staff, there was an experience that was far more common. I, along with a number of my coworkers, noted that theater rooms 5 and 6 were unusually cold in comparison to the other theater rooms. When popular movies brought in masses of people in sold-out shows, it was standard for those theaters to be very warm. The body heat generated by the large audience routinely raised the room temperature to less than comfortable levels. Theaters 5 and 6 were the exception to this rule. They were often unexplainably cold. Several of my friends also had a vibe or a feeling that they weren't alone when they went into Theaters 5 and 6 by themselves, or when they were alone in the back of the projection booth. Theaters 5 and 6 would trigger my fight or flight senses whenever I had to clean them by myself on slow weekdays. Being alone in those theaters put all of my senses on high alert, and my heart would subsequently beat just a little bit faster. The cold, dark, and dirty, empty theaters, coupled with the stories of the ghost that haunted them, cultivated a touch of dread. Despite my hesitation of being alone in those theaters, I had to go in them, because it was my duty to clean them out before the audience came in for the next showtime. The atmosphere when cleaning those theaters by myself was just as chilling as when I was alone in the projection booth. In fact, the atmosphere in the projection booth and near Theaters 5 and 6 reminded me of the atmosphere of my dad's old haunted farmhouse. Both places had a heavy and unnatural feeling, but I have to add that the old farmhouse was in a league of its own, as its atmosphere was far heavier, much more sinister, and filled with dread. Unnatural, chilly, and thick are the words that best describe the sense of the atmosphere in and near Theaters 5 and 6. While I personally never saw the apparition of the ghost of the Galleria movie theater, I did come to believe that it was haunted. My belief that it was haunted by a ghost was largely based on the stories that my friends and co-workers shared with each other, and on the presence that I felt there. When I worked as one of the supervisors at the theater, I did everything that I could to avoid working as the projectionist in the original projection booth. While I didn't get the sense that the ghost was evil or some kind of malevolent entity, I was very uncomfortable when I was alone in the projection booth. Can you blame me? Just because I didn't think that the ghost was sinister and looking to harm me didn't mean that my impression was correct. If the place was haunted by a being that I couldn't see, then how could I know when it was around or what it was doing? Without being able to know with certainty who or what it was, how could I know that it wasn't like the evil spirits that haunted my dad's old farmhouse? The staff of the movie theater frequently talked about the apparent haunting. We theorized that the ghost of a construction worker haunted our home away from home at the theater. It wasn't much of a leap to arrive at that conclusion. After all, the local newspaper had reported that a construction worker died in a tragic accident while the Galleria shopping mall was being constructed in the early 1990s. The sightings of the ghostly apparition dressed in the attire of a construction worker near Theaters 5 and 6 seemed to neatly mesh with the record of a construction worker falling to his untimely death at that very spot. Perhaps the scariest of all the haunted movie theater stories is this final one. Jeremy was working as the projectionist in the projection booth. Jeremy was a big muscular guy. He was known to be tough, and his punch hit like a mule kick. His random punches to the arms and bodies of male employees were notorious. When he hit you, it hurt. Sometimes the film would snap while a movie was running, and the projectionist would have to make the necessary repairs as quickly as possible. This in and of itself was a normal occurrence for any projectionist in any theater. What wasn't normal or ordinary is what followed next. As Jeremy put the repaired film back in place on the projector, he felt a sudden cold chill accompanied by the feeling of an unseen presence. He was alone in the projection booth, and the door was locked. The movie film that broke was the movie reel that was playing in Theater 6. A firm finger poked Jeremy's shoulder hard. His blood ran cold. He whipped his head around, and he saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. There was no one else there. He was alone. After that haunting experience with the theater ghost, Jeremy refused to be the projectionist in the upper booth. He'd only run projection in the lower booth, in the newer theaters on the basement floor. The lower theaters were completely separated from the haunted booth in the original 9 theaters on the ground level floor. I recently spoke with a few of my old friends and former co-workers, including my manager from my days working at the movie theater. They told me that they still believe that it really was, and probably still is, haunted. So, next time that you are at the movies, take a look around you and see who's sitting next to you. Does anyone around you look like they are a few pixels short of a full high-definition image? Does the man or lady sitting behind you appear to be fading from reality? The theater might be hosting both the living and the dead. It could be a ghost that's sitting with you. Vampire, Trail of Terror. Written and narrated by Tony Capobianco. It was 13 hours past noon. Special Agent Kono Castabello inspected the scene of the latest murder. The victim was a pretty young woman. Her pale, lifeless body floated alongside the reflection of the moon in the plunge pool at the bottom of Coffin Falls. The reflected image of the half-moon made it appear as though it was about to eat the remains of the victim. There was just enough blood in the water to make the reflection of the moon look like it was a crimson blood moon. This uncontrollable and unwelcome detail of the natural world added to the already unsettling and horrific scene. The town of Coffin Falls was named after this beautiful but dangerous waterfall located in upstate South Carolina. The falls themselves were named on account of its shape. The water cascaded down, giving the eerie appearance of a coffin. Tragically, the name of Coffin Falls also seemed fitting on account of the lives that were claimed there. Hiking to the top of the falls may have rewarded the hiker with a stunning view, but that view sometimes came with a price. The wet rocks were slippery, and at times one misstep was the last step that a hiker ever took. While one death caused by the falls wasn't a surprise, 3 deaths in 1 month was unusual. This, the third death at Coffin Falls, seemed to confirm Special Agent Castabello's suspicion. The previous 2 deaths were no isolated incidents or accidents. He thought that these were murders, and that they were committed by the same individual. To his mind, this had been the work of a serial killer. Not only did the details in this case match up with the details of the previous 2 deaths at Coffin Falls, but they matched up with 10 other unsolved cases along the East Coast. As with the other recent unsolved cases, the throat of this young lady had been ripped out. Her body had been drained of all its blood. A macabre trail of 13 dead bodies, drained of blood, stretched from the Hudson Valley of New York to upstate South Carolina. If Special Agent Castabello was correct, then this would bring the killer's number of victims up to 13. One thing in particular was different about this last death. Unlike the 12 previous killings, there was a witness. Adam Gabriel called 911 immediately after he saw his best friend, Lori Haddensmith, plunge down Coffin Falls. "I'm Special Agent Castabello with the FBI," he said as he flashed his badge to Adam. "Why did you call 911? What did you see?" "My friend, Lori, was at the top of Coffin Falls. She screamed like she was really scared. I looked up, and then she fell down from the top of the falls down into the pool of water," answered Adam. "Was Lori by herself up there? What was she doing?" Agent Castabello asked with a firm, inexpressive look. "Well, sir, she wanted to take a look from up top to get a memorable view. You see, Lori's big on making as many moments as possible, and she didn't want to miss this moment. She said that the full moon reflecting in the water below the falls probably looked gorgeous. She loved gazing up at the night sky for as long as I knew her," explained Adam in a voice that seemed very far away. "Adam, why weren't you up there with her? Tell me exactly what you were doing at the time." "Sir, I was gathering some more branches to keep the fire going. We were going to sleep by the fire underneath the night sky," said Adam as he fidgeted with his fingers. "Why tonight? Why did you come to Coffin Falls?" asked Agent Castabello with the intention of seeing if Adam would keep his story straight. "We came out here tonight because it was a beautiful night. Lori didn't want to miss any moments. She wanted to make memories and enjoy every bit of every minute. She was especially excited to come to Coffin Falls because she had only moved to South Carolina a few days ago," Adam explained with tears falling down his cheeks and over his mouth. "Did you have a fight with Lori tonight? Were you sick of being just friends? You wanted more than friendship, didn't you?" Agent Castabello pressed with a sharper tone that matched his sharper questions. "Wait, what? No, it wasn't like that, sir. We were best friends. We didn't have an argument tonight. Lori recently broke up with her boyfriend, and she wanted to hang out with me to take her mind off of things, Adam said sharply. If you weren't intimate with each other, why did you move down here to South Carolina together? Agent Castabello questioned curiously. Sir, we decided to move down here for a change of scenery and to start over. I had gone to the University of South Carolina, and I loved my time in the Palmetto State. The people were always so nice here. The sunny, warm weather often acted like a natural antidepressant. I often told Lori how great it was down here, so it was natural for her to want to move down here. After her ex-boyfriend broke her heart, it just seemed to make sense to move down here. She was going to waitress tables and look into going to college, Adam calmly explained as he wiped tears from his eyes. Adam, your license says that you're from Junction Ridge, New York. When exactly did you leave New York? I left New York a month ago, and Lori got down here several days ago, Adam responded as he quickly ran his right hand through his black hair. So you've been down here a month? Asked Agent Castabello. Yes, sir. That's correct. That's very interesting. Son, did you know that there's a trail of dead bodies from Junction Ridge all the way down here to the South Carolina mountains? Questioned Agent Castabello with an icy cold look in his eyes. No, I don't know anything about a trail of dead bodies. Back in Junction Ridge, I'd heard about some animal attacks, but what does that have to do with anything? Adam confusedly asked. Animal attacks, huh? So you think it's a coincidence that 13 young women had their throats ripped out and their bodies completely drained of blood? You expect me to believe that these murders just happened to occur wherever you've been, and at the same time that you just happened to have been there? Agent Castabello, this is crazy. I have never killed anyone. I didn't hurt Lori, nor would I ever hurt her. New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Victims were found in each of those states exactly when you were passing through them. We have the credit card receipts of the gas that you purchased on your trip down to Coffin Falls. While I was interviewing you, I had the Bureau look into your credit card statements. After I looked at your license and saw that you were from Junction Ridge, I made sure that we'd take a real close look at your travels. This can't be happening. None of this makes any sense. Why would I hurt strangers? Why would I kill my best friend? Why on earth would I call 911 to report a murder if I actually committed it? Adam said in frustration. I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like you were jealous. You couldn't stomach the fact that Lori was dating someone else, so you murdered the first girl in Junction Ridge. Ripping out her throat was your way of punishing the part of the human body by which Lori communicated her rejection of your romantic feelings. Unreciprocated love can crush the soul and unhinge the mind from reason. You got your first taste of murder, and you liked it. You killed 4 innocent girls in the Hudson Valley over the course of a year. Then, when Lori broke up with her boyfriend, you snapped because she still wouldn't see you as anything more than a friend. Already a serial killer, this final straw sent you on a violent murder spree. It was a killing spree that saw you murder 5 girls in half of a day. After that rampage, over the course of a month, you murdered 3 more young ladies, including Lori's murder here at Coffin Falls. The murder of Lori, the genesis of your rage, was the culmination of your fiendish work. As we stand here tonight, you've murdered 13 innocent young ladies. That's what I think happened, Agent Castabello explained as he stepped closer to Adam. I'm innocent. I had nothing to do with any of this, If Lori didn't die from an accident or an animal attack, catch the maniac that did this, angrily said Adam. This was an animal attack. It was a series of violent attacks committed by a member of the Homo sapiens. There will be justice for these homicides, said Agent Castabello as he read Adam his rights and arrested him. As Agent Castabello walked the suspect to the police car, he felt a chill go down his spine. For just a brief moment, he saw a pair of glowing red eyes peering at him from on top of Coffin Falls. He blinked his eyes, and when he opened them, the red eyes were gone. Were his eyes mistaken? Was his mind playing tricks on him? Or was it possible that there was some strange animal there? He couldn't be certain, so he had decided to ask some deputies from the Coffin Falls Police Department to do an additional sweep of the area. Something troubled Agent Kono Castabello. Everything seemed to fit perfectly. Too perfectly. Rarely did evidence match up this well so quickly. Then, too, the psychological element just felt off. Logic told him that his psychological profile of Adam seemed sound. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that his assessment wasn't really sound at all. He had extensive experience in tracking, arresting, and interviewing psychopaths. He had interviewed dozens of convicted serial killers in an attempt to become a better criminal profiler. Adam didn't seem like a psychopath. Gut instinct kept telling him that there was something more to this case. Sleep wasn't possible for Agent Castabello so long as his mind was nagging him. Next, he did two of the things that made him a great agent. He followed his instincts, and he never put off things that he could do now. The half-moon was still in the night sky as he walked to his car in the hotel parking lot. Feelings of urgency and impending doom flooded through him like a rising tide as he drove towards the police station where Adam was being detained. 3 sheriff's deputies were on duty at the police station when Agent Castabello walked through the doors. It was 3:45 in the morning. The sensation of impending doom increased as he walked to the jail in the back of the station. Darkness mingled with low light in the jail cell. A shadowy figure lurched over Adam's body. It appeared as though the shadow person was sucking on or biting Adam's neck. As he drew his gun, he ordered the shadow man to step away from the prisoner. The shadow man laughed maniacally and said, "No, you foolish mortal. I give the commands." "I'm not going to tell you again. Step away from the prisoner and put your hands up," Agent Castabello ordered. "You have no idea what you are dealing with. You haven't got a clue as to what is about to happen here. You should have stayed in your hotel and gone to sleep," said the Shadow Man. As the Man of Shadows stepped closer towards the bars of the cell, Agent Castabello could see that this was no ordinary man. It appeared like a grotesque creature from a nightmare rather than a man. A demonic face with a large mouth and 2 large fangs grinned at him. Terrible red glowing eyes stared at him. No, those dreadful red eyes seemed to stare right through him. "What are you?" asked Agent Castabello as he kept his gun pointed on the hideous creature. "I'm immortal. I'm a god," replied the creature. "What are you doing to me? Why are you doing this to me?" cried out Adam with a terrified look on his face. "Since I'm about to wipe this FBI agent's mind of any memory of me, I'll tell you. I am a vampire. You left Junction Ridge at 6:30 p.m., and you arrived here at Coffin Falls at 6:30 a.m. the next day. I followed you all night, and I feasted on and killed young women when you stopped for gas or went to a rest area. I want to watch you suffer. It gives me great pleasure to watch innocent humans suffer. I will drink your blood from time to time so that I'll be able to taste your anguish. The blood of the anguished tastes bittersweet. The world will believe that you are a serial killer. In fact, I'm about to make you a notorious serial killer. Momentarily, you will have 15 murders to your name, and 2 of them will be police officers. But wait, it gets better. You will also join the company of Ted Bundy when you escape from this pathetic jail cell. Imagine the terror that will grip not only the town of Coffin Falls, but the entire country when the pathetic mortals learn that a psychotic serial killer killed 2 sheriff's deputies and escaped. After you are free from here, the trail of terror will continue, explained the sinister vampire. 2 deputies came in after hearing the commotion. The keys dropped from the nervous deputy's hands. They were terrified by what they saw. Agent Castabello picked up the keys and unlocked the cell so that he could arrest this fiend and get him away from Adam. When the door opened, the creature moved faster than the eye could track. It grabbed Agent Castabello by the throat and told him to look into his eyes. Looking into the agent's eyes, the fiendish creature compelled him to forget that he had ever seen it, and then he told him to go to sleep. Then, with great violence, the horrifying vampire threw the unconscious agent into the wall. Next, the fiend did the same to the male deputy. The female deputy that came to the jail cell wasn't so fortunate. She had fired a clip into the creature along with her partner when he had lifted Agent Castabello off of the floor by his throat. The bullets had no effect. She reloaded and began to fire more rounds into the monster. Although her aim was true and her shots hit the mark, the creature seemed unfazed. The vampire ripped out her throat and drank from it until there was no blood left. The vampire then moved to the front of the police station to devour the second female officer that was on duty. So diabolical was he that he wanted to make sure that it appeared as though the serial killer kept killing only women, even when his life was in danger. This would make people think that the serial killer was monstrously powerful. This massacre at the police station would turn Adam into a notorious serial killer whose legend would eclipse almost all others. The message was clear. Not even the police or the FBI could stop this serial killer. Terror would dominate and fill the news reports as various talking heads would discuss the massacre at the station. The vampire responsible for this trail of terror wanted to make sure that evil captured the headlines, and that it would trend on social media. His goal was to cripple the country and the world with anguish and fear. With this in mind, the dreaded vampire absorbed the gunshots from Deputy Tara, and then he grabbed her by her throat with his left hand and slit her throat with his right fingernail. His fingernails were sharp as razors. Finally, he drank her blood as it gushed out of her neck. Always minding the details, he wanted to ensure that some blood stained the front of the station. The bloodstains were meant to add even more fear and revulsion to all who would see this heinous scene. In what he believed was his master stroke of evil genius, he took Adam's arm and made him write the following in the blood of the victims. The trail of terror continues. Signed, the Undead Terror, Tut. I hope that you enjoyed your stay here at the haunted Half Moon Inn. The Master requests that you consider supporting me and the inn by becoming a a patron of mine on Patreon. The Half Moon Inn needs your support to keep the doors open. You wouldn't want the residents here to feel forgotten and abandoned, would you? Creating quality scary stories to share with you is very important to me. Running this inn of horror is a passion of mine, and I would truly appreciate your support. The world is hurting. It needs more horror. Help me to heal the world through horror. Together, with your help, we could haunt this world one home at a time. Until next time, always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there.